Hello and welcome to another ship review. Today we will talk about Succubus. This is Sancho's Nation pirate frigate. This is one of the better pirate frigates out there because the bonus to afterburner velocity is very valuable in faction warfare. I used this ship quite a lot back in the days, and I think I have a highest number of kill marks on a Succubus. It went up to something like 45 or 50, which is quite rare for me because I do my best to lose my ships, but I just couldn't lose the Succubus at all. Since you have so much mobility and in general ability to escape unfavorable fights with opponent's afterburner, it's actually quite hard to lose this ship. I only had a similar experience with Nergal. I also tried my best to lose it and I just couldn't because the ship is so strong in 1v1s. And it got buffed recently at the end of 2025, a bit randomly. I think maybe CCP looked at the data and thought, well, this ship is not used that much, so let's buff it. But it's not used much, not because the ship is weak. The ship is actually very good. It's not used much because the ecosystem is quite unfavorable. Firstly, you cannot enter navy complexes in faction warfare, and against advanced ships, the cost efficiency of Succubus is not that great. So you enter a fight where it's 50-50, but your ship costs 5 times more, so why would you do that? You will just fly an assault frigate instead. And secondly, recently, Dead Space 1 and Afterburners just went through the roof, and now they cost about 80 million. They used to cost 20 million for many years. And when you downgrade your afterburner on this ship from the best Dead Space to Tech 2, the ship just gets way worse. So when you are in a painful decision between paying 80 million for an afterburner or using a highly suboptimal Tech 2. The Core has the same problem. You kind of have to use A-type NOS or newts, but once the price for this module for some completely unrelated reason to faction warfare goes through the roof, well, nobody really flies Crores anymore because, well, why would you pay like 250 million for a fitted frigate? You can get, you have a much better options basically for the same price. So this is the problem. The ship itself is very good, but the ecosystem is just unfavorable. Now, in terms of archetypes, Succubus can kite, and when brawl or scrum kite with pulses or kite with beams. I think these days scrum kiting and brawling with pulses is just not that feasible. These feats are not great to begin with, they're usable but not great. But with current prices for this ship, it's just not cost effective. You're gonna lose your ship now and then, well, quite often if you commit to a brawling or scrum kiting fights, and if every fight costs you 200 million, it's just not feasible. With kiting, yes, you will occasionally lose the ship, but it's gonna be pretty rare if you know what you're doing. So I will only show you a kiting beam fit with some variations. And in terms of engagement map, if you go with a kiting fit, anything really is in your engagement range. Of course, when you encounter some soft counters like tracking disruptors when you have to leave, against some long-range destroyers, you may have to leave as well if we can track you. But the point is, it's difficult to lose this ship, since you have a bonus afterburner, and once you're out of web range, it takes a very specialized setup to actually pin you down and kill you. I lost my Succubus to a combat interceptor once we were redesigned into these super strong anti-kiters. So this is kind of an indication of how difficult it is to lose it if you know what you are doing. Okay, so next let's look at the feats for Succubus. Okay, so as I said before, we will look at kiting feats. I will show you a couple of variations because there are several ways to fit it. And I will talk about some of maybe less common modules this fit. Okay, so we will start as usual with a baseline. Immediately a couple of comments. So A-type afterburners, as I mentioned, they are extremely expensive these days. You really want Dead Space Afterburner on a Succubus because it just makes it so much better. But as I said, if it's too expensive, and I think 80 million is way too expensive for an Afterburner, you kind of have to downgrade. So keep it in mind. Currently, as you can see, 240 million for a fit is just ridiculous. Second is Faction War Disruptor. Not critical, but it helps quite a bit and it's not that expensive. In particular, I think in the modern Succubus, you kind of want it a bit more than on the pre-buff Succubus, because Succubus finally got a proper targeting range after the buff. Before that, I would say it was kind of, well, your targeting range is pretty bad anyway, so why would you need a super long point? But now I think it kind of makes sense, probably to invest 30 million in this fit. Especially since the ship itself these days is very expensive. It used to be much cheaper as well. So once you go above 100 million for the ship, then it's kind of fine to invest 30 million in some of the cheaper faction modules. Next is web. Web is generally quite important for Succubus for two reasons. First, when you fight out of position, and very often you will fight out of position, you will be webbed on the warping, since Afterburner does not provide enough speed to escape webs on the warping. And if you don't have webs and you fight against a ship with a web, then you don't have control and you are not going anywhere. So you need a web to get sufficient control to pull away from web range. Without it, you will be likely killed on the warping, just like a slicer or a garmor that's caught on the button. So this is why you have this screening web. Low slots, pretty obvious. Rigs, you need like full set of locusts to enhance your optimal range. The optimal range is around 24 kilometers with standard. The DPS is not that amazing, as you can see on 150. It's not great. If you hit it, it'll be like 165, probably. It's okay, but it's really not great. It's like a light missile armor, and you have a significantly worse optimal range. Yeah, and the Nosferatu is offline. Is just a heatsink essentially in between the two beams. The buff in 2025, in addition to the range, it was increased power grid, which is a bit weird because Succubus is really CPU limited and not PG limited. And another small buff was to capacitor. Another really weird one because Succubus never really had issues with capacitor, so why did we buff it? I don't know. But it made possible one weird feat, what I will show you a bit later. So the alternative is to feed MSC. This allows you to use Tech 2 stuff in low slots. The downside is that, well, your signature will be a bit larger, 33 against 38, and the number of hit points after you use all MSB charges will be a bit worse on MSC fit as usual. So I think that MSB is a bit better, but this one is viable as well. Now, the weird fit is Tracking Disruptor. So this existed for a while, particularly I encountered it a couple of times in a Minmatar Warzone. There are a couple of guys who use similar fits. I will explain the possible variations as well. So the idea is that you try to add Tracking Disruptor to your typical kiting setup. And this, I suppose, should be a proper one, not to confuse you. This one. And I suppose Tracking Disruptor should be, or Warp Disruptor should be a proper one as well. Okay, so yeah, so the idea is you use Tracking Disruptor to get better chances against long-range destroyers. Now, you can play around with these two modules. So, for example, you can drop this, and as you can see, it's still quite viable. So 134, this is with armor rep running, and you probably won't need to run it that often. So in this case, you may not need it as well, and you're cap stable. So if you fight against ships that you know you will have a decent mitigation, you just drop capacitor booster and you replace it with a web. As I explained earlier, web is quite important. Now, if you fight against ships that cannot project up to like 18 to 20 kilometers, when you drop Tracking Disruptor, because you won't need it anyway, and when you feed a web again, web is important. And then, even if we can scratch some of your tank, well, you have perma-tank, because you will have a cap booster and then you will have an A-type rep. It's not, the tank is not that great, of course, but you won't need to tank that much since you will be kiting with like a tiny signature anyways. So you kind of play around with two of your medium slots, and depending on the matchup, you replace one of them with a web if it's appropriate. And this works well after the buff primarily. So before the buff, the cap would be really on the limit, but now it's quite usable. So yeah, the rest is exactly the same. This would be like the most optimized way to use Succubus, I suppose, if you really want to push it to the limit against the current meta. But the vast majority of ships of Succubuses will be shell tanked, either with MSC or with MSB. These are the classical fit, I would say. Okay, and I will not show you the pulse feeds because, as I explained earlier, I think they are not that great. Okay, I hope you found it useful, and I will see you in the next ship reviews.